The name of today's event is Ensuring and Measuring Return on Investment of Your Federal BD Efforts. Welcome to today's special broadcast. This is live. We normally record these ahead of time, but we felt like this topic was so timely that we wanted to do a live event. We are broadcasting from the greater Washington, D.C. area, and we welcome our listeners from around the country. Measuring return on investment in business development is more important now than ever, given the chaos in the federal marketplace, with contracts being canceled, procurements moving to the right, and the FAR being rewritten. New service offerings, partnerships, and business development approaches are necessary. But what are those new strategies, and how do you measure success beyond proposal win rate, which is what most people measure? And how do you measure progress towards goals as well as ultimate goal attainment? And that's what we're talking about today. My name is Shirley Collier. I'm the founder and CEO of Scale to Market and host of the Growth Masters Federal podcast. We help small GovCons think, speak, and act strategically to grow and create value in the very complex federal marketplace. My very special guest today to help me tackle this important and timely topic is the very knowledgeable Jacob Barkley, CEO and founder of Barkley Group. Jason, can you please tell our audience a little about yourself and Barkley Group?
Certainly. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for the warm introduction, Shirley. My career really began working at top 20 public accounting firms, specialized in government contracting regulations, cost and pricing matters, and really DCA compliance. And throughout that process, I grew to appreciate the journey of small businesses, which led me to launch Barkley Group, a accounting and advisory firm for government contractors. We have grown to 5 primary silos, providing CFO advisory, client accounting services, proposal pricing, contract management, and DCA compliance. One of the most rewarding aspects of my career is that we team with small GovCon businesses and grow alongside them throughout this journey.
Thank you, Jacob. I want to remind all of you to please ask questions via the chat feature as we're having this discussion. We'll answer your questions at the end of our discussion in about 20, 25 minutes. So, Jacob, I've been looking forward to today's conversation. I help companies develop and execute strategic and tactical business development plans, and you measure whether those strategies and processes actually work. It's 2 sides of the same coin. So let's begin our discussion with why. Why is it even necessary to measure return on investment in the federal sector? Doesn't just looking at proposal win rate suffice?
That's a fantastic question, Shirley. And we see ourselves trying to identify that exact problem numerous times. And so it's paramount to measure an ROI, or return on investment, on business development, because all small businesses are resource constrained, meaning we do not have unlimited funds or capital or cash to pursue every capture that looks remotely relevant or really aligns with our growth strategy. So we currently live in a world with unlimited data. And what I mean by that is we have all different data sources that we should be identifying. However, the challenge becomes analyzing the data and thinking strategically to make those sound business decisions. So I find personally measuring a ROI on business development will help us provide the business with insights on what is working and what may not be working as well. And this insight will provide an understanding on when and what necessary changes we should be making. Now, go ahead, Shirley.
I was going to say, I agree with you very much that you can't truly understand what you don't measure, and you can't change something that you don't understand.
Correct.
So let's look at business development from a timeline perspective. Suppose the CEO says, we want to double in size in 5 years. We want to grow from 10 million to 20 million. What we do is to evaluate the company's, what we do at Scale to Market is to evaluate the company's past performance to document what they truly do better than others, and then to determine if there's market demand for what they do well. We then put together a very specific data-driven business development playbook and then execute. But the hardest thing is actually execution. How do you implement the plan? So, Jacob, what factors do you recommend to your clients to evaluate to determine if a specific opportunity is worth pursuing?
Great question. Ultimately, we like to evaluate the potential based on several factors. One of those is the historical spend and forecasted budget. I think that's a key element that you want to be able to identify. Another one would be the procurement methods used, whether or not this is a full and open, or if this is a sole source or potentially a set aside. I think an element that every company needs to glean from is, will it fit within your core capabilities and your past performance? And identifying that is oftentimes a struggle because we're always trying to stretch to get to that past performance. The level of responsiveness and the access to decision makers is absolutely paramount. So if we don't know the customers, it becomes a challenge to really understand what is working well or what isn't working well. And then the overarching competitive landscape. So if we know there are numerous folks that are better poised to win the work, it becomes a competitive landscape, and it's harder for us to glean the right capture that fits us. Now, through going through each one of those kind of elements, this analysis ensures that your BD resources are focused on relationships with higher ROI potential. It also helps ensure that if there are multiple consultants that you are utilizing, so if you're utilizing external consultants to help you do BD functions, that they're all moving forward in the same exact process, or they're rowing the boat in the same direction. Does that kind of make sense, Shirley?
Yes, I agree 100% with all those factors. And I would add that the factors of technology risk, pricing expectations, the strengths of your teaming partners, regulatory obstacles, and the strategic value of the opportunity should also be taken into consideration.
Absolutely.
We have developed a tool that I think you and I've discussed before. It's a weighted decision matrix for our clients to calculate a win probability score as an opportunity moves through the sales process. And the decision matrix is more than process. It's how to think about and objectively evaluate upcoming opportunities. Business development people are very optimistic about win probability when they're working an opportunity. So a weighted decision matrix injects discipline and objectivity into the equation. So, Jacob, let's say that the information gathered indicates that the company should pursue the opportunity. How can they tie specific BD activities like attending industry days or engaging with customers to actual contract wins?
I think it's critical to really track those BD activities in a CRM or some sort of BD tracking system and be able to link them to the follow-up actions. So we want to be able to identify meetings, proposal invitations, or RFPs that all link together. Over time, analyzing which activities yield the most engagement or results in successful capture is going to, again, bolster the company to have that trend analysis to be able to identify if it's working or not. And through this, creating a clear activity to opportunity pathway is going to really help us define and align those attributes that win to specific investments. And I think that's the end goal for everyone.
Yes. Can you give us an example of exactly how that is measured?
Sure. So when we encourage clients to track the number of BD touch points per opportunity, we're thinking from the sense of emails, calls, meetings, to really be able to create that relationship with a specific opportunity. Another one would be time spent on opportunities, to understand the labor cost of how much effort is spent on pursuing something. And if we spend 90% of our time putting all the eggs in one basket, if the basket disappears, we're now left empty-handed. Another one would be lead sourcing, so identifying how we become aware of an opportunity. such as market research, or is it a partner referral, or is it maybe an industry day? And then I also think it's helpful when you're tracking the stages of progression over time, how long it takes to move an identification to capture to proposal. Walking through that, we oftentimes glean this whole 18-month life cycle of procurement, that it takes 18 months to get ahead of it. And so kind of understanding how we're moving through that process is helpful. And then the last thing I would close on is really BD cost per the dollar awarded. So identifying financially the total spend on a BD activity compared to the value of contract won. I think it's a metric that we need to be able to isolate and determine where we are expending our resources as a small businesses, or as a small business rather, to ensure we're getting the proper ROI. Now, these metrics really help you identify where you are in the process and if it's efficient or inefficient, and where you're overspending or wasting. And I think that's going to help a business going through the process.
I would agree that those are excellent. So you mentioned comparing cost to the value of contracts won. How do you measure return on investment from time and resources spent on government proposals that we don't win?
Even a unsuccessful proposal contributes to ROI if tracked strategically. Metrics like cost per proposal, or lesson learned, or proposal reusability and capture rate over time help assess if the investment builds a stronger future pipeline. A maturing BD process oftentimes will yield a long-term ROI through improved win weights and proposal efficiencies. We see this as being a helpful win, so to speak, even if you lose the capture, understanding that there was still gleaming notes that we took away that helped us get better as an organization. We also look at the pipeline effect to identify some losses that then open new doors. So if a loss still led to a deeper relationship, maybe a teaming partner relationship with a prime and a sub, or intel that makes you more competitive next time, there's future ROI in that. And I think those are all helpful tips and tricks to kind of document.
I agree. In the decision matrix that I was referring to earlier, we label that as strategic value, but you
Beautiful.
elaborated that very well. I appreciate that. So, speaking of proposal win rate, how do you advise your clients on how to get a true reading of the total cost of pursuing an opportunity? How do you evaluate the overall return versus the overall cost?
So we do it a number of ways, primarily by tracking both direct and indirect costs associated with each opportunity. A company is able to identify the total cost. So this could include labor hours, such as your direct labor hours, subject matter experts, your SMEs, and indirect labor, part of your program management team, your business development team, or even your C-suite leadership team. And across the capture, BD, and proposal process, we really want to track all the hours. By doing that, I think it provides us a real granular metric to understand what was the total effort expended internally and with our teaming partners. Now, consultant support is another one. We oftentimes see graphic artists or proposal managers or pricing experts being rolled into a capture. And those are also costs that we would want to be able to capture and identify and isolate against a specific opportunity. There may also be tools or software that are used in a proposal submission. So one recently on a client matter, they utilized a AI compliance tool that incurred an additional cost. And then there may be travel or printing or various miscellaneous expenses that you're incurring to package the final proposal and getting it submitted. And then the last one would be opportunity cost. And I think ultimately, when we compare the cost of a pursuit to the potential contract value in the margin, we really can calculate a BD ROI ratio. And really, it's defined by, you have your contract value, you have your cost of pursuit, and then identifying that number as your ROI. But it's also important to factor in life cycle value of the entire award and assess, will this contract lead to option years or future task orders or recompetes? I think that long-term lens really helps put the upfront cost into perspective. And we oftentimes find companies overlook that life cycle value and how that will shape the business to meet their end goals down the road. So a great example of that today, Shirley, would be numerous companies trying to get onto GSA schedules if they think that's going to be something that's a long-term goal that may open future doors.
Yes, I agree. And I'm glad to hear you kind of elaborate on all the costs that that should be captured that go into business development. And I'm particularly impressed and pleased to see that you take profit margin into consideration when calculating ROI. Sometimes businesses will look at total contract value of a
Mhm.
win, which gives an inaccurate picture. And I want to support the analysis of such things as option years, plus ups, incumbent advantage during recompetes. Unlike commercial jobs, government contracts span multiple years and have longevity. At least they used to.
Yeah.
The government's starting to not award option years right now, but I'm hopeful that that's temporary. So let's take a break. I'm talking to Jacob Barkley, CEO and founder of Barkley Group, an accounting and advisory firm for government contractors, providing CFO advisory, client accounting services, proposal pricing, contract management, and DCAA compliance services. I'm Shirley Collier, president and founder of Scale to Market and host of the Growth Masters Federal podcast. Using our proprietary Davy Growth framework, we develop and help our clients execute 3-year customized business development playbooks. Now, back to our discussion on measuring ROI for business development efforts. Jacob, we were talking about getting a grip on the true cost of opportunities. What about the pipeline in general? What are the key metrics? What key metrics indicate that our pipeline is healthy and growing?
That's a fantastic question, Shirley. And I think a lot of business owners need to be mindful of this, that a healthy pipeline includes a balance of qualified leads across various stages. And some of those metrics could be a pipeline to booked ratio that we would typically see some sort of, almost a 3-to-1 type ratio or higher. There's another element of the stage progression rate, right? Leads moving through capture and proposal. I oftentimes like to take a step back and really look at diversification. So when we're specific on diversification, it's agency diversification amongst that government contractor. There's also consideration needs to be held around average opportunity size and the value and whether or not you're a prime versus a sub. And then the win rate trends are also kind of a slam dunk metric for us to gleam on. One thing that I would mention on the prime versus subcontractor role is that oftentimes a company will find it easier and more advantageous to be a subcontractor as you're just starting out. And so there's a lot of synergy between both of the efforts to be a prime and a sub, and I think they both need to be pursued. Really, in summary, Shirley, these indicators show both opportunity quality and really the long-term growth potential as you kind of pursue both of those as a prime or sub or any of the other metrics. And then having a well-defined plan of action really serve as the foundation. I think that's critical. We as humans need to have a plan to follow.
I would agree, and I would add that trends and profit margins are also important. Sometimes business development people get caught up in the total revenue of a contract and are not as aware as they should be for on profit margins. And in government contracting, you can win a huge contract, lose money, and go out of business.
Yep.
Now let's turn to my favorite topic, which is forecasting. What factors should be taken into consideration to perform accurate forecasting based upon the pipeline?
Forecasting really is a business pipeline includes several elements. One, most commonly, is just a weighted pipeline value. So assigning a P win to each opportunity will allow us to really financially look at what the pipeline could bear into the future. We also look at the capture stage accuracy. So identifying where we are in the stage and how accurate is it, as we kind of are marching through that process. And then the historical performance of a win rate by, it could be by a customer, it could be a contract type, it could be prime or sub or NAICS code. And then I think it's also helpful to really understand how forecasting your business pipeline ties in the resource availability. So typically we want to conduct analysis on the back office infrastructure to be able to support the new contract, or elements of IT or human resource or program management. All of those help to be able to kind of forecast where our resources may have constraints down the road. And then the timing assumptions of the anticipated awards, that's oftentimes the hardest one to hit, especially in today's environment, of when is it going to drop, when is it going to be awarded, and so forth, so on. So when preparing a forecast, we lead the discussion beyond just total revenue, as you kind of alluded to, but rather ensuring we have the capacity and the strategic readiness to be able to deliver during execution. I think it's paramount.
I agree, and I like that strategic readiness. And I would add work share to that calculation. Everyone in government works in teaming arrangements, and if the pipeline contains an IDIQ or a GWAC, the value, of course, comes from task orders. One, so you don't put into your forecast the $1 billion instrument, but what is the value of the task orders that you're likely to win?
Absolutely.
Um, so, Jacob, how can small or mid-sized GovCon firms track the success of their business development function over time?
I think success can be tracked using multiple lenses or factors. You could look at a win rate on a bid that was submitted. There's also the growth in total revenue contract, or total contract value that was awarded. I also think the expansion to a new agency or NAICS code, bringing in that diversity in your portfolio of growth, is also a success that needs to be tracked. Reduction in BD cycle time is something that, as you grow a company, we see it's often something that people haven't identified, but it needs to be something that you will glean over time. The more at bats you get, the more muscle memory you have going through that BD cycle time, and you will gain efficiencies through that process, and there is success in that. And then I would close with just really the improved proposal quality scores and debriefs. So understanding that, one, we have a compliant proposal, but understanding how we can identify and monitor success over time, like we mentioned earlier, repurposing some elements of the proposal. So setting these benchmarks and reviewing trends quarterly really ensure that the BD function is aligned with strategic growth, and then just delivering measurable value. If we don't have that, we're kind of left guessing if the BD function is producing the right ROI for us.
And that kind of feedback is so important. And most small to mid-sized GovCons don't set those goals or track these factors. I recommend a balanced scorecard methodology for federal business development. So, in addition to all the wonderful things that you mentioned, it measures staff knowledge, evaluating teaming partners, contract and customer profitability, CPARS ratings, and recompete win rate. I work with my clients to set these targets on these factors as performance goals for the BD team. But of course, you're the one who comes in afterwards to measure those results. Before we leave this topic, let's talk about goals and performance expectations for both internal staff and external BD consultants. How do you advise your clients to set these goals? How do you know when things are not working out with an external consultant?
That's a great question. The way we determine that change is needed is by first establishing a plan and process to measure your progress. So the fundamentals of change require a clear plan and defined process and metrics to start slowly measure those, to measure the progress that you guys are making as a company. This is achieved really fundamentally through the following elements. So setting SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals for your BD personnel. For external business development consultants, these expectations should be established upfront, and then monitoring that performance performance and progress. We have frequently seen firms utilize pipeline reviews as a SMART goal, which is not sufficient. The business development function needs to be way more comprehensive, and it needs to be a comprehensive plan. Just understanding you have a pipeline isn't sufficient alone. I think assigning targets for opportunity generation, quality leads, meetings, and win contributions, I think those are elements that we really need to be tracking. And then lastly, tracking progress monthly or quarterly and comparing actuals to targets. I think when we do not see progress as a company, meaning no pipeline growth, no meetings, no movement in the capture stages, it really is just a signal that something's not working. Maybe the strategy is flawed, and maybe the consultants are just not delivering, or maybe it's an internal alignment that is lacking. But we really don't know unless you establish expectations and commit to monitoring them. So when we really start to track the right metrics, and surely when we review them consistently, it really becomes clear that when where we should be doubling down, and then when should we pivot off to do something else. And it really all stems from the offset of this podcast, that having data and then monitoring against what will allow you to analyze and think strategically, it's paramount. It really sets the foundation for us to grow.
I agree 100%. And, this is a particularly challenging area because you don't want to just incentivize volume, like number of teaming agreements, number of proposals. It really is establishing the type of teaming partners that lead to success, the type of opportunities, and the type of actions that result in sustainable, profitable contract wins. So, Jacob, let's now open up the floor for questions. Let's see here. We talked about this a little bit, but you may want to elaborate. When using an external consultant for business development, how does each development function have their own SMART goals?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So if you have a team, oftentimes we'll see right now, multiple growing companies will have a business development resource for Marine Corps, and then a business development resource for Air Force or Navy, for example. I think as I kind of think through that question, does each business development have their own SMART goals? I think they may have their own unique SMART goals, but what's critical, and I think what's missing in most small businesses, is that there has to have that comprehensive plan. That's the foundation. That really is an umbrella amongst all of the BD resources. And so where we find companies oftentimes perplexed is that you hire a consultant, an external consultant, 6 months goes by, and we didn't get an ROI on it. What happened? Well, if you kind of do a deep dive on that, we didn't have them working off the same SMART goals, and really working off the same comprehensive plan that would guide the entire business forward. Does that kind of make sense, Shirley?
Yes, it does. And here's a sort of a companion question that both you and I can answer is, how do you identify progress milestones along when there is a long period of time before you see results?
No, that's a fantastic one. I think everyone, when it comes to business development, right, we as humans are naturally want instant gratification, right? If we could just go out and win a new contract next month, wouldn't that be nice? I think going back to the SMART goals, having something that is realistic but measurable, I think having this data helps prove whether or not things are working or not. So oftentimes as small businesses, we have resource constraints. We don't have a well laid out plan for business development. And so we're left guessing, and we don't have the data to prove what did we guess on. And so what I would encourage folks, as since the acquisition lead time is so significant, really measuring based off of these metrics. And that's really what today's topic is about, is producing and monitoring your data to be able to make those sound business decisions. that's going to allow you to, again, make a change or pivot into another avenue.
Well, one of the reasons I love talking to you, Jacob, is that we have complementary skills and opinions about this. I agree 100% on the data, but I also know that the thinking of the business development people, are they thinking properly? Do they really understand our business model? Do they really understand the type of profitable work that we are going after? And sort of testing that understanding through pipeline meetings and one-on-one coaching, I think should complement the data.
Spot on. I think it does. And I think you said that perfectly. It's really thinking holistically and having everyone kind of on board is helpful.
Thank you, Jacob, so much for collaborating with me today on this important topic. I want to remind everyone that today's webcast is recorded and will be on our LinkedIn channel, our YouTube channel, not LinkedIn, YouTube. And then the audio will be posted to the Growth Masters Federal Podcast channel. And we're going to be sending those links out to everyone who registered for this event. Thank you again, Jacob, and thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.